share your screen with your audience? Entire screen. Do I want to share my entire screen? Or I just want to share the window? I don't know. See, this is what I don't know, and this is what makes it frustrating. College football. Okay, maybe I share this. See what this does. Okay, that does that. Okay, we are literally going right now, so whenever you want to start, let's do it.
We're back with you on Broadway to Broadway with a special roundtable edition of Second Down Sunday. Though some nights say it still constitutes this First Down Sunday, with being a few minutes before midnight. Well, actually, folks, as a matter of fact, the East Coast of the continental United States is into Sunday. It is 12:05. We are so excited to be with you for this first ever edition of Roundtable here on Second Down Sunday. Owen Kasanovich is with me. I'm Wyatt Copeland. Owen, this is week 12. It doesn't come without some upsets, some monumental collapses, and by the way, spoiler alert, they're all within supposedly the most reassuring conference in the Power Four conferences this season. I mean, why don't we start talking about what's gone on with Texas A&M and South Carolina? The Gamecocks blew a massive lead. But before that, I wanted to share something with you. I still can't believe our show is called Broadway to Broadway. You ever think people get confused and expect show tunes on? Because today there were a lot of different tunes going on around Power 4 and even some Group of 5 games.
You got that right. I mean, another week in college football. More upsets happen in the case of Oklahoma beating Alabama. Alabama can't get revenge from last year's loss, and Oklahoma players even knew it. They scheduled us for homecoming. Well, we're not taking that lightly, and Alabama ultimately falls 23-21 while outgaining Oklahoma by 200 yards. You mentioned that Texas A&M game, and before I have my quick thoughts on that, we're going live on YouTube, on our YouTube channel for the first time. So, folks, if you're tuning in on YouTube, bear with us, or when you watch this, bear with us. This is trial and error. This is our first time ever doing this in addition to being on Zoom. So if we mess things up, we apologize. We're just going to roll with the punches, and we're trying something new out here. But we're going to break down a lot of games that happened today and go over some of the best action from today and have our thoughts and kind of what we have in store for the next college football playoff rankings reveal Tuesday night. But that South Carolina Texas A&M game, 30-3 at halftime, down 27 points, but Marcel Reed lights up the second half and finishes with 439 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. EJ Smith got into the game as well for Texas A&M, which is probably the deepest running back room in the country, and just really, it goes to show that I don't think this necessarily was a trap game for Texas A&M, but this was their first sign of a potential where things don't go their way, right? But they're able to respond and come back to win. And at this point in the year, all you care about is not necessarily style points, but when you're a top 5 team, you just care about winning. And Texas A&M did just that, Wyatt.
Well, what's interesting, Owen, and this is according to ESPN, as I saw this in the studio this afternoon as I was board hopping the NC State Miami game. According to ESPN Insights, SEC teams now 0-286 when trailing by 27 or more points in 2004 coming into today. Texas A&M breaks that, the largest comeback ever in Aggie land. And of course, Owen, right on the heels of Mike Elko being offered that 6-year contract extension, it looked like it was, at least in the smallest sample size ever, smallest time frame, maybe the most quick-hearted decision compared to Jimbo Fisher and how that didn't work out in Texas A&M. Of course, everyone still remembers his press conference, being introduced to the press and school representatives on the board of trustees and administrators about how he's going to bring titles to College Station, which just didn't pan out at all. And by the way, just like we're hoping this pans out, it is the antithesis of what is expected to happen if James Franklin and Virginia Tech football move forward, as ESPN and multiple other news sources reported this morning that the former Penn State coach is set to begin exploring a contract and longevity for an offer at Penn State. But let's stick with some games here, Owen, because we do owe people our own perspectives on what's going on as the college football race continues to amplify not only toward conference title game appearances, but of course the at-large bids. I personally thought, though I didn't see much of the Texas A&M game, that the defense was pretty stifling for the Aggies as they made that comeback. They really got after Lenora Sellers. They picked him off. It's again very reflective of what Greg McElroy, the college football ESPN color analyst, has said multiple times on his ESPN College Football podcast over the last couple of weeks. It's eye test, eye test, eye test. And I think when people in the committee, whether it's former coaches or certain quality control analysts, they go and sit down and watch this game, they're gonna forget about what happened at Texas A&M. Will it bring good implications as to how they move up instead of down in the poll this week? Not certain yet, but if this is going to be a Texas A&M team that's either going to win in Atlanta or go into it as an at-large team and perhaps play in a first-round game on a different campus, then you're looking at this team with a really strong eye test right now. And Marcel Reed, was he at his best all the time? No, but I mean, it's November now, and this is where you want your defense to, of course, back up a quarterback who didn't come out as sharp as he would have.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, again, I touched on it a little bit. All I care about is winning. I don't necessarily care about eye test and style points. You know, a lot of coaches, some may say they're into it during certain weeks, you know, especially early in the season and when these rankings start to come out. But all I really care about is getting the win. And you look at the 11 o'clock slate or the 12 Eastern slate, Notre Dame rolled. Michigan was in a dogfight against Northwestern at Wrigley Field, but was able to get the win. And then, of course, we're talking about the Texas A&M South Carolina game, where they had to fight and claw back in the second half and do. And then you look at these 2:30 games, right, where you have Texas Tech continuing to perform the way they are, just absolutely steamrolling UCF 48-9. I think they are putting themselves in a potential to be a top 4 team, especially with Alabama going down. You know, and then we get into games that happened at 6 p.m. or of course, the Georgia Texas game where Georgia absolutely took control in that second half. And then we got Ole Miss, who was in a little bit of a dogfight there, but wins 34-24. I thought, you know, they just had kind of where they weren't playing their best ball, right? They had to go for it on a lot of fourth downs, went for it in the red zone, but were able to pull off the victory and score 14 points in that fourth quarter and hold Florida to 0 points in that second half, which I think is extremely important. And then my takeaway, just to go back to the 11 o'clock or noon games, is Notre Dame. Like, Pat Narduzzi didn't necessarily have to come out and say it, but he did. But Pitt.
Aaron Donald was standing on those chairs on that game day set with Mr. McAfee, and it seemed like that already had Marcus Freeman rubbed the wrong way. Lo and behold, the two legends within their own respective settings and longevities within their programs. Of course, Mac with ESPN and Disney, and Donald with Pittsburgh. His number retired today. They pushed the envelope on him.
Yeah, just a lot of turnovers from Pitt, and what could ever go wrong for Pitt did go wrong. They get a pick six, try to go for 2.
Love explodes for 57 yards, similar to how you did against Boston College. I mean, and Heinschel, he got sacked. I mean, once you let Chris Ash's front seven get to you on that first drive, even second drive, it even goes beyond the numbers. It's just a matter of staying locked in right from kickoff, and it looked like Notre Dame just had it between the buzzers today, between the zeros.
100%. Yeah, they know what's at stake for them, right? They lose, they're done. So this was their toughest test on their schedule, or I should say their last tough test on their schedule. So they got a pretty easy couple of games to finish up, and if they win, they will be in the college football playoff, potentially hosting a first-round game in South Bend. And you know, my teams of the weekend, or my teams today of Saturday, would have to be Utah, Notre Dame, Texas Tech, in Georgia would probably be my top 4 teams, not necessarily rankings wise, just the way these teams played this weekend, the way they executed on offense and defense. I mean, Utah, a lot of conversation could be made if Utah finishes 10-2 and doesn't make a Big 12 championship appearance. Could Utah sneak into the playoff, especially with all the shakeups that happen? Like, who knows what happens with Texas? Oklahoma upsets Alabama. So there's a little bit of, I wouldn't call it chaos in the SEC, but it's going to be interesting to see how the SEC finishes up. And obviously, Alabama has the head to head over Georgia. Miami, 41-7 victors today. I mean, they looked really good, albeit against a Jekyll and Hyde NC State team, but still, they get a but they win. Georgia Tech comes back from what looked like the dead and pulls off a 36-34 victory on the road in Chestnut Hill and Boston College, which I will say, despite Boston College now going to 1-10, that's always a tough place to play. USC also in the 230 slate, 19 consecutive points, beats Iowa. Iowa's officially dead in the college football playoff, which I have a little bit of an issue of why they were even ranked coming into this game in the first place. I get it. They played probably the upper echelon in the Big Ten, the toughest, but I did not think they deserved to be in the top 25 in the college football playoff rankings. USC stays alive. They're going to potentially be in the top 15, so that was a big win for them at home to stay, going to 8-2, 6-1 in the Big Ten. And then Virginia bouncing back. Unfortunately, Louisville did not on Friday, but Virginia bouncing back and beating Duke 34-17. So, as we look at the Big 12 and the ACC, a lot of craziness right now. A lot could happen. And we haven't even got to our frontline football friends. How about the Navy midshipmen? 41-38 over South Florida. Navy puts themselves in American Conference game contention. You got to love it. South Florida's officially done. And you have to wonder what happens with Alex Golesh, if he takes a job elsewhere, if pursued for a Power 4 team or not.
Right. Well, and I don't think we can even begin to summarize the meaning of this Navy win without looking at what this team has prided itself on, and that's being physical up front. They didn't really do that entirely against Notre Dame. Even North Texas, I mean, Mestamaker, he drained them a little bit. I mean, Landon Robinson, one of the seniors honored today, definitely in the running for an All-American nose guard with how much pressure they've gotten up front. They needed a great game out of him, and all the while, as the defense got a lot to Byron Brown, they forced interception. They got to him just on a couple of sacks. They still allowed 556 yards, but another senior, Eli Heidenreich, he had 146 yards receiving, and he became the midshipman's all-time receiving leader. And that is a monument of its own. That's a monument milestone, considering how difficult it can be to know the playbook in second-year offensive coordinator Drew Cronick's wing team looks, and it can be hard to know how many touches you get. That's something Brian Newberry talks a lot about, especially Cronick, knowing how it's not about how much you can bring in as it relates to rhythm and volume of plays from one week to the next. I mean, we've talked about a lot in frontline football. If this team's getting into the 400s, 500s a game, job's done, regardless if it's Brandon Chapman, the senior snipe, Alex Tesco, who had a massive 72-yard touchdown today, I believe. It is always kind of that next man up, and the spotlight continues to float to different guys. I still thought Byron Brown played a great game, and it was a 76-yard touchdown run for Tesco to put the Mids ahead 7-0 in the first quarter before USF kicked 3, and then Keyshawn Singleton, who's been one of USF's top weapons on the outside this year for Brown, who Newberry talked a lot about as someone who just plays up-tempo. He's got an NFL-caliber arm, and he's a perfect fit for up-tempo offenses. Hard to disguise at times for defenses in the American. And Navy played like it had still not lost a game this season, which is how it has to play in all three phases. It's always trying to play better complementary football, as Newberry and even defensive coordinator P.J. Volker have outlined. Want to also go into a couple of other games. How about junior linebacker Jacob Rodriguez for Texas Tech scoring a touchdown? He lined up Wildcat and then the Red Raiders zone, they get him into the end zone. He was a former high school quarterback, and they continue to have that inseparable relationship down there in Lubbock. And he of course, anchors this arguably best front seven in the Big 12, if not for the entire country right now. That's why the Red Raiders are ranked so high, as we talked about previously. But this is how you have to get it done, especially knowing that Barrett Morton's only going to do so much for you. And if you want to play more than one game in the college football playoff, of course, win a Big 12 title game, then you go to someone like Rodriguez. But I thought Texas Tech was just so sound today. You want to also look at a couple other games in the SEC. I mean, Gunnar Stockton, as that game wraps up, he was just done a few moments ago, and what a game it was for him. He had 229 passing yards, passed for 4 touchdowns, 29 rushing yards. He's heating up at the right time, so for 13 touchdowns over his last 3 games, Owen. So as much as people talk about Texas Tech, I don't think Georgia, by any stretch of the imagination, is out of the Final Four picture here, if not for playing in Atlanta.
100%. Yeah, I agree with all that. And speaking of Jacob Rodriguez, I understand why people wouldn't necessarily have him among top candidates for Heisman, but I definitely think he's at least in the top 5 for sure. I think.
It's not like he's completely absolved of being in it, right?
I mean, they finally gave him the ball down in the red zone at the goal line to let him run one in. So I think Texas Tech understands how important he is to that football team. But yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot left to be desired, and again, I think it'll be interesting to see how the top 10 fares. Right? I mean, there's so much, not necessarily at stake, but Alabama losing, how far do they drop? You know, where does A&M stay put at 3? Ohio State and Indiana, I would probably bet stay right at 1 and 2. So how much maneuvering is there going to be in this top 10? And you know, it should be an interesting Tuesday coming up here as we're, you know, shifting focus. But I gotta say, like, you know, again, we talked about it on the podcast on Wednesday, and going back to this Oklahoma Alabama game, I just want to get this off my chest. Like, Alabama, they have to be able. Even Nick Saban said it. They have to be able to run the ball or be strong enough at the line of scrimmage just to take some pressure off this passing game. Because again, we knew what Oklahoma was going to do, despite without R. Mason Thomas, their best pass rusher on the edge there. You know, they needed to be able to get themselves in some manageable situations, and they couldn't really do it. They had to have it all on the arm of Ty Simpson, and unfortunately, Ty Simpson only had 80 passing yards in that second half. And again, you know, I get it. Alabama fans are enamored with Nick Saban being there for as long as he was and the amount of success they have, but you can't expect Kalen DeBoer to win 4 championships, you know, in a span of whatever. But it's going to be interesting to see how Alabama can recover from this loss. They're not out of the college football playoff if they can win out, but you gotta think this is a gut-wrenching loss for this team.
And it's not as if teams around the country right now, as in Georgia, Vanderbilt, need help. And I know that's just within the SEC. There's teams like Miami that need certain medication from other teams. They need prescription losses. So not to speak too medically here, but they need certain diagnoses in their favor to actually stay within the college football playoff conversation. And rankings, I mean, it tells you a little bit right now. I mean, are people overreacting a little bit? I think so. You talked about it a moment ago, Owen. It's all about the eye test right now. You have to look past that. You have to think about, well, how well is this team starting and finishing games, and a lot of that tends to rest on the quarterback beyond just what's going on in all 3 phases. And I think you look at a team that I don't know, again, I don't know is getting as much deserved conversation as it should right now, because James Madison, it was dominant in time of possession today, and it had the ball for more than 42 minutes. I know it wasn't a good App State team at all, but just to kind of shine more on what's going on in the group of 5s right now, James Madison, if the college football playoff committee selected tomorrow, James Madison would have my neutral vote, unbiased opinion, but it would have my neutral vote over South Florida. It would even have my vote over Navy, just because this is a great team in the aftermath of the Kirk Zanetti era that can just control the ball, run down your throat. I mean, Joey Mallory, he had 105 yards, 3 touchdowns, felt like that with how often he was getting to the end zone. But I mean, they have an overpowering run game. Their quarterback didn't even throw for a touchdown. Barnett, he ran for 2. I mean, if you're getting that level of production, I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to beat a team like Alabama at this point, but it's going to yield well for you to go play in a good bowl game. And hopefully that's in a first round game.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I definitely am shocked that, James Madison hasn't been in the conversation more. And that was kind of where I was going to go. I lost my train of thought when we were talking a few short moments ago, but you bringing up James Madison kind of refreshed my thoughts on this. Like, what will be the case of the group of 5, especially come Tuesday night? I don't think James Madison gets enough love. I get it. Their schedule's hasn't been the toughest, or necessarily their conference is the easiest. And you had Southern Miss without their starting quarterback today lose 41-14. In the other side of that conference, it's East and West, I believe, are the divisions. They were undefeated, but no, I think it's crazy to think that Texas State beats them, so that conference definitely takes a hit. But I agree. I think James Madison deserves more love, and I get it. We're enamored with the American Conference because they play some tough non-conference games. When you look at the likes of Tulane playing Ole Miss and Illinois, and Navy now being back in the picture, I get it. They lost to North Texas, but those two teams could potentially meet again. So it's going to be interesting. And if I had to put a team in right now, I would probably choose either Navy or James Madison, or potentially North Texas too. I just don't think North Texas has had to run the gauntlet of the American quite like Navy and Tulane. In my opinion, I understand North Texas is a great football team, and they beat Navy head to head. They took it to Army. They got Caleb Hawkins, a great running back. But to me, it's got to be Navy or James Madison in that conversation, and Tulane with an outside chance, depending on how they do this final month of the season. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. James Madison definitely deserves some more spotlight for sure.
Well, you know what could have been a trap game, and this seems like a stretch, but considering how Ohio State had limited availability at wideout today, Julian Sains still threw one great game, I thought. I mean, he completed 23 passes, touchdown, 184 yards. He was pretty much without Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. Tate was out for a second straight game due to leg tightness, according to the AP. Smith, he wasn't really Smith in the first half. He had 4 catches for 40 yards. And honestly, if Sain's still completing his first 11 passes against a team that's already transitioned away from Deshaun Foster, but it's still a Big Ten game, you need it. It's not like you're playing Notre Dame or another non-conference opponent at this point in the year, say a group of 5 or an FCS team. I mean, that's a good win for Ohio State, and it's 48-10. Oh, by the way, Styles had a 100-yard touchdown return, which I thought was pretty remarkable for a kickoff even at Ohio State. And the Buckeyes, when they score on their first 5 possessions, they're pretty hard to stop, as we learned last year in December and January.
100%. Like, I think there's 2 teams I would have said before today that could potentially beat Ohio State if they were to meet in the national championship. You want to know who those 2 teams are, but it's potentially down to just one. And I might throw in another team, not necessarily replacing this team, but today's inconsistency in that game kind of made me a little reserved to pick them. But I would have said Georgia for sure, albeit with some secondary issues. But I think up front they're good. They're good enough to. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think Georgia's good. I think Georgia's good enough to compete with this Ohio State team on defense, despite some secondary injuries. Unfortunately, they lost an NFL prospect today at linebacker. That was number 3 in Mel Kiper's positional groups. But what does Mel Kiper know? We won't get into that. But so I would have said Georgia. Alabama was the other, but after losing today, and I just don't feel like Alabama is a complete football team, albeit they're allowing the least amount of points in SEC play coming into that game against Oklahoma. They still only gave up 23, but and there's also a pick six, so they really did they gave up 7 less today. But I don't know if I can trust Alabama on a consistent basis now after what I saw with their inability to run and just losing a game like this at home. I also throw Texas A&M in there. That's why I'm a little reserved about them is watching that game today. But if you had to make some picks about some teams that if you think Ohio State's the best team in the country, who do you think could challenge Ohio State, Wyatt?
Well, I don't think Oregon's out of it by any means. I mean, this is a team that Ohio State always gets the best of. Oregon has one of the most ridiculous run defenses in the country. We talked about this team pretty extensively preseason. We'll come back to a little bit. But Ja'Cory Moore has been great for them offensively, and Bear Alexander defensively. I think that's probably the day one pick they produce if it's nobody else this year. Oregon's going to be great. If not for Oregon, I have to go Texas Tech. And if it's not them, then probably Miami. I know it's not one definitive pick, but I think with how weak the ACC has looked at times, I mean, it is deep. Don't get me wrong, but I can't really put a team like Georgia Tech or Miami out there yet, with knowing that Oregon is still loaded with a couple of day one, day two picks on the defensive side of the ball. And speaking of which, while we're on the topic, Owen, there's one league we haven't talked about, and that is the wide open Atlantic Coast Conference. 5-team for 1-loss programs coming into the week, but then there were only 2 head-to-head matchups between those 5 today, and that's not even counting the performance that Georgia Tech needed from Haynes King to come back. This team was down 11 after 3 quarters in Chestnut Hill. You said it earlier, it's a tough place to play. Elsewhere across the conference, Miami probably played its most complete game of the season. Freshmen on the offensive side of the ball, they had a lot of standout performances, not to mention Jacoby Thomas with a pick 6 and then another interception right after NC State forces and recovers a fumble in the first quarter. So I think you get a lot of great performances out of a team like Miami that could have some good implications if they build off of it and they come out ready to play next week. But, at the same time, Pittsburgh just wasn't good at all. So this conference stays pretty wide open right now. I think if you get a team like Georgia Tech to put together like 2 great performances, then I think that's your clear cut into the college football playoff. But with how Miami looked today, not easy to count them out either.
100%, yeah. And again, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Pitt, and SMU for that matter, all have 1 loss. Pitt and SMU with 3 total losses on the season. So it's going to come down to, again, tiebreakers and that sort of thing. And again, Miami's not necessarily out of it as an at-large team because of, again, what happened today. Oklahoma wins, Alabama loses. That might actually have hurt Miami a little bit just because, yeah, that would have been their 3rd loss. So
Virginia won again too, so that's disappointing for Miami's camp. But as we still have about 1 more minute left here, something important to note: where was Duke's response after the upset loss up in Connecticut last week? I mean, we don't consider Duke a football school, and really most national analysts don't expect Duke to be pouring out 10-win seasons, right? But this is a team that spent a lot of money on a quarterback and Darian Mensah this offseason. They have a great wide receiver in Cooper Barkate, who continues to prove himself, but he just doesn't have it from the defense. By the way, Duke fumbled the ball away once, and Mensah threw 2 picks.
Yeah, Duke's always been kind of a little bit of a questionable team for me, and it's no disrespect to them, but to me it seems like they get every big game at home somehow on their schedule. And I'm not necessarily, as we're running out of time here. My last thought is Duke's just one of those teams that Manny Diaz is trying to build something, but I think it's going to take a little more time than maybe that he wants to. And for that, I don't think it would have been good if Duke got in at 9 wins and won the ACC and messed up the college football playoffs. So we thank you for joining us on this college football reaction show, Week 12, and we'll see you on Wednesday for another episode of Broadway to Broadway and Frontline Football.
And one more score to report: the Georgia Bulldogs take down Texas 35-10 in Arch Manning's first visit to Athens. So long, everybody. Texas.
End stream.